You are listening to Chi-O Conversations, a podcast about anything and everything that matters to Chi Omegas.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our podcast. Thank you for joining us. I'm Leslie Harrington, CEO for Chi Omega, and we are joined today by Christina Geist, a New Jersey native and initiate of the Sigma Epsilon chapter of Chi Omega at Vanderbilt University. Christina is a well-known author and has published several best-selling children's books: Buddy's New Buddy, Sorry Grown-Ups You Can't Go to School, and Buddy's Bedtime Battery, to name a few. Christina is also founder of Boonbox, an online boutique for the creation of beautiful memory boxes with personal letters and also photos that can be given to others for almost any occasion. On top of that, Christina owns a brand strategy and design firm called True Geist that services global clients in the areas of brand identity, package design, and brand logo creation. Christina lives in New York with her husband, Willie, who you might know as co-anchor of MSNBC's Morning Joe and Sunday Today with Willie Geist. And they have two children, Lucy and George. So Sister Christina, again, so excited to have you with us today. You are such a great storyteller. Thank you for stopping by.
Thank you for having me. What a treat.
Yeah, well, we want to start with your first story, your sorority story. What drew you to Vanderbilt? What was your first impression of sororities on campus? And why, most importantly, did you join Chi Omega?
Absolutely. That's why we're all here, right? I am from Ridgewood, New Jersey, which is a kind of leafy suburban town about a half an hour outside of New York City. So I moved from New Jersey to Nashville to start at Vanderbilt in the fall of 1993. In fact, I was just back. Willie and I were just there this past weekend for our 25th reunion. So, wow. So it was a very surreal weekend to be back on campus. And this conversation is timely because all of those memories are so fresh. And I was able to reconnect with friends from, all different sororities, but especially the Chi-Os. And so when I got down to Nashville, what I thought was really great about things at Vanderbilt was that our rush was actually delayed or deferred, I think you call it, until second semester, until January. So first semester was really focused on your hall and on your dorm and on the girls that were right there around you and getting to know them and, realizing that even though I was a little out of place being from the North, at a Southern school, it didn't feel that way. As soon as you get to know people, you realize you have more in common than you thought. And even though you might be from, very different backgrounds or very different cities or states, we actually had so much in common. And I felt that was true in joining Chi-O as well, that even though I might have been one of maybe 3 Chi-O sisters when I was there who were from New Jersey, maybe 5, but there weren't many of us in Chi-O who were from New Jersey, which for me was fantastic because all of a sudden I was sisters with girls from all over the country. And I knew that wherever life might take me, I would always have a friend. I would always have a sister I could call there to kind of get started, whether I got transferred to Atlanta or, wherever the road might take you. You realize that there's a sister in all of those places and kind of a starting point that makes the world feel a little bit smaller.
It does. You kind of multiply your friendship, your wardrobe, everything. It's wonderful.
Definitely.
What would you say is your greatest Sigma Epsilon memory?
Definitely the day that we matched with our big sisters. So Pledge Day was, or bid day. Sorry, I'm using all the wrong terminology. But bid day for us was, as I said, second semester. So maybe late January. And then my birthday is in mid-February. And so I remember that as a pledge, each week we would be sort of paired up with an older sister and to get to know the sophomores and get to know the upperclassmen that maybe we didn't know as well during rush or during first semester. And there was Amy Yarbrough, who became my big sis, who's from Gunnersville, Alabama. You couldn't find two places farther apart than Ridgewood, New Jersey and Gunnersville, Alabama. But we quickly realized we had so much in common, and she was my big sis. And I remember learning that on my birthday in February of that freshman year. So the best birthday gift I ever got when I was, I guess, was my 19th birthday, was Amy, who I just spent a couple days with her when I was back in Nashville just this past week, all these years later.
I was just about to ask if y'all kept in touch, and it sounds like you have.
Absolutely. She is the inspiration for Boombox. The very first Boombox that was created was for her 40th birthday.
My goodness. Well, Chi Omega has inspired you both, and in more ways than one. That is truly a good Chi Omega story. I think you win for best Chi Omega story. And thank you, Sister Amy Yarbrough. If you happen to be listening or watching, thank you for being such a good sister to Christina here. You guys are a great example to our podcasters listening today. Now, Christina, you are a best-selling author, and I'm guessing Lucy and George must be now like 15 and 13. Is that right? If I did the math right?
Yes, I now have the smallest feet in my family.
They were your greatest inspiration, but what else inspired you to share children's stories?
Sure. Well, after college, my career path was always involved writing. So I started out writing for the news station, actually for the CBS TV station in Nashville. That was my first job out of college. And that's what all my internships were directing me towards, journalism and news. And so I'm a writer by trade. I pivoted early on and ended up working in public relations firms, advertising agencies, marketing agencies, building brands, helping brands tell their story, helping businesses communicate who they are and what they stand for, and doing all types of work, but it always involved writing. And then when my kids were younger, I took a few years off professionally and found that the stories that were dancing around in my mind, I finally had the time to actually sit and write those down. I was no longer writing at work. And so I didn't have that outlet for expression. And so all of a sudden I had, stories of toddlers dancing around in my mind. We were living in New York City at the time, where all you need for inspiration is to just head to whichever playground you choose that day in Central Park or Riverside Park. And there are constantly little kids just kind of scooting by you on the sidewalk, or getting my own kids acclimated to preschool and little baby dance class and all these places that you don't really experience until you become a parent if you're not an educator, which I'm not. And so I had these creative ideas, and I finally said, when they were 3 and 5, so 10 years ago, I'm going to spend the couple more hours I have now in the morning when they're in school, and I can, sit quietly for a minute and write these down. And that became a long journey that's now, 10 years in the making of writing stories and going through the publishing process and the pitch process and all of that comes along with releasing books into the world, which is probably a whole nother podcast in and of itself. But really the ideas came from my own life, from my own kids, from my nieces, my nephews, and kind of all their little friends scooting around New York City and beyond.
Well, I think Lucy and George Shaw are lucky that they had such a great writer for a mama to tell those stories and teach all those great lessons.
It's fun now because they're seeing these books through a very different lens now as, teenagers. And this latest story, Buddy's New Buddy, that came out this summer, is all about making a new friend and finding what you have in common. And Buddy is, he's young. He's in first or second grade in my imagination in this story. And my kids are much older now, but I feel like we're all sort of still practicing this lesson of all you need is one thing in common with one person, one day at a time, and friendships can form if you're just sort of looking for what you have in common versus what makes you different. And so sometimes now one of my kids will say, well, Mom, it's like the buddy thing. And I'm like, yeah, it's like the buddy thing. we're learning, we're learning from our own lessons.
That's true. And it's kind of like you and Amy Yarbrough repeating, the same story again. You didn't think you had anything in common, and look at you now. So,
It's true.
Well, we talked about boombox gifts. That is such a unique concept. I have to know, aside from Amy inspiring you, what else made you kind of bite the bullet and do it and make it into a business? And what advice might you have for Chi Omegas listening today that had their own good idea brewing?
For sure. Yeah. So like I said, this entire concept of a memory box for somebody's big birthday or milestone or graduation, or even, pledging a sorority, whatever that might be, any kind of big moment in life, there's a boombox for that. And these memory boxes happened to start when Amy was turning 40. And the idea was born among my best friends from Chi Omega, my sisters. We all came together to make this for her. And then I kept making them for other people in my life, including my closest Chi O friends that I'm still deeply connected to today. And then just felt that, I've spent, at this point, close to 20 years professionally helping to build other brands and helping to get other brands off the ground. And that was my job. That's my corporate job that I do. And maybe it was time to actually put everything I had learned into this business concept that happens to kind of represent the way I live my life, which is that your life is measured in your relationships and not your accomplishments. And so all of a sudden I had this business idea that took that philosophy and brought it to life. And also happened to kind of need all of the skills that I had developed over time. So I think that for me, the Chi Omega Sisterhood was the most important ingredient for that. I never would have even had this idea had it not been for Chi O. And it just so happens that those relationships have helped to kind of take that seed and nurture it farther and farther along. So early on in the days when I first launched Boombox, one of my younger Chi O sisters named Elizabeth Jenkins, who was Elizabeth Cook when we were in school. Elizabeth is a journalist. She's a magazine writer. And she looked me up and said, I think I should be writing a feature article about you for Vanderbilt magazine, which was then reprinted in the Chi Omega magazine. So who would have known that Elizabeth would have come back into my life, several years later, and she was a few years behind me in Chi O. And so these relationships kind of come back again and again and start to take on new life later in life, which is one of the things that's okay about getting old. And one of the things that's okay about celebrating my 25th reunion from graduating from Vanderbilt is that these friendships come and take on new shape and new life after all this time. And so my advice for the younger generation, so to speak, is first of all, with your idea, to think about the small steps that you need to make. Not the big idea and all of its glory and thinking of it as this huge, huge thing, but actually break it down into smaller parts and break it down into smaller steps and think about, who do I need to talk to and what do I need to do to get this idea off the ground? And start there and start small, just kind of one step at a time. Because I think when you have a concept and you have an idea, it can just sometimes feel so big that you don't even know where to get started. But oftentimes there are small steps you can take one at a time to just kind of say, am I on to something here? How do I test this out? And just start there.
I happen to be the recipient of a boombox. I have it with me right here. I brought it with me and I started reading it on the plane again. I received it for my 10-year anniversary as CEO for Chi Omega. And I would like to call it the boohoo box because every time I read the notes, I just boohoo into the box. They're just so sweet and sentimental. It comes as such a keepsake. So little plug for boombox there.
Oh, that's so nice. Did you use the tissues? It should have come with a little packet of tissues too.
Those are long gone, but it's just so nice to come back to it and remember those messages and people that have come in and out of your life. You talking about your friends in Sigma Epsilon chapter, how you can graduate, but then we never really leave. We keep coming back into your life. And so you can open that box up and have those memories right there, vivid in front of you. It's just such a wonderful treat.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. I'm glad that you felt the boom.
I did feel the boom. I love it. We are so on brand. Speaking of being on brand, you talked about being a brand strategist all your career. How important would you say that a woman's personal brand is, and how might Chi Omega have influenced yours?
Yeah, I mean, the world is so different now than it was when I was in school, in that, everyone is sort of publishing about themselves at any point in time, right? And social media has done that, where you have almost your physical identity and then you have this digital identity at the same time, right? And so I think that that's most people's perception of brand, is kind of who you are to the outside world. And a lot of that is really coming across in the way that you carry yourself digitally, and not just in real life. And so I think what I learned from Chi Omega is definitely confidence, and being surrounded by women who were very dynamic, very well-rounded, and really very smart. I mean, at the Chios at Vanderbilt, we had the highest GPA on campus. We took that seriously. It was cool to be smart. It was cool to be accomplished. And it was definitely celebrated to kind of bring your best self in whatever that was, and bring your best skills and talents to the table. So even as early on as we were doing, rush rounds, I remember I was a dancer growing up. So I remember having such fun doing all the dance skits and all the performances where, other girls were focused on different aspects of what made the house come together and shine as a group. And you really needed to kind of come forward with your individual style and your individual talents and your individual kind of confidence early on. And you had an opportunity to do that as a CHIO. And so I think that carries forward in any aspect of your life, really. And so it was very important.
It is kind of a safe place to try new things and maybe not be so good at it. And that gives you the confidence, like you said, to keep trying and keep thinking about new approaches.
Absolutely.
Now, since you're a mom now to teenagers, I'm curious, I'm also a mom. If your next book was for teenagers, what lesson would it teach?
You know what? This is a tough one. I think it would just be about, it's okay to just kind of live in the moment, because our teenagers are so directed right now towards what's next for them, what's happening for college, where are they going next, what do they need to accomplish in order to get to their next step, that I worry that they're not going to just stop and be in high school and just be and enjoy that time of life, which is, you never get that back. And so I would love for our teens to just kind of slow down and really, really enjoy this time of life. Because when I look back, I think of course I'm a writer, so I think this way, but I really do feel like your life is in chapters, and you have, your teenage chapter when you're under your parents' roof. And then you have your college chapter where you're just sort of taking one foot and stepping out into the world. And then you have your post-college years where you're becoming a professional at whatever it is that you're doing, or stumbling along in that path, which we all kind of do early on. And then later, if you're like me, you kind of settle down, and then you have this whole chapter of building your family. And then in my 40s, this chapter of a career renaissance, Boombox, my books, and True Geist, my branding firm, all started the year I turned 40. So there's this whole kind of later chapter that's kind of waiting for you. And for women, I think it's important to also remember that it may not happen all at the same time, but it will happen with time. And so just kind of be in the chapter you're in and live it. And then if it feels a little bit sad, when you turn the last page and you have to move on, then that means you did it right. And that means that you did that chapter the right way. You should feel a little bit sad to turn the page, because if you do, then boy, you really crushed that. And now you're going to go on to something that will surely be, just as exciting, if not more. And you have to kind of look at your life in those stages and steps. And then as you move through it, it becomes less scary about what's coming next. And you can stop and, feel that little moment of sentimentality about the thing that you're moving away from.
Yes, it should feel bittersweet to make those transitions, because you're leaving something that's become fun and familiar, and you're moving into a stage that you know nothing about, or maybe you think, gosh, this isn't as exciting as my 20s or my 30s. But if this is 40, looks like Christina Geist 40, there's a lot to look forward to, I think.
Yeah, well, now this is 47, but yes.
Oh, you're younger than I am. How do you think your life would have been different if you didn't join Chi Omega when you went to Vanderbilt and you were just independent?
I think I definitely would have probably just had a smaller group of friends and a smaller kind of network of people that I kind of call home in my heart, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but I always try to teach my kids, and the analogy we use at home with Willie and with me is like, have a big tent in life, and leave your tent open. So like the sides are open, like a circus tent sort of, and anyone is welcome inside of it. And so I think for me, being a part of CHIO on top of the friendships I had already formed at Vanderbilt just made my tent that much larger. And there are women in my life who are among my closest friends today that I did not meet until after bid day. And so while I know I would have had a very happy college experience, I also know that my whole world got wider when I, accepted that bid and became a CHIO sister for sure.
I laughed out loud when I read that. And I was wondering, would you share the recipe with your sisters, or should we consider that just another Chi Omega secret?
There's no secret. My mom is half Italian. And so we definitely were raised in like, an Italian household in terms of the way that we talk and connect and communicate, and also the way that we cook. And so with the chicken parm, I think for me, it's like the trick is to not let it get dry. You have to make sure that it stays juicy. And so sometimes I think if you're working with like your chicken cutlet and you let it get dry, that's kind of where you lose the magic. So you want to be really liberal with the sauce and really liberal with the cheese, and, give it that time in the pan with like a really good olive oil before you pop it in the oven, so that it really kind of stays like juicy. And that's what my family loves.
You heard it here, sisters. Chicken parm to perfection. The olive oil, the time you take, do it. Well, Christina, I have loved sharing time with you today. Thank you for letting us into your tent, and thank you for being part of the inside of Chi Omega's Big Crazy Tent all these years. Your success journey is an inspiration to all of our collegiate sisters, and we just can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you, Leslie. And thank you to all the CHIOs for all of the support you have given me. It means the world. Thank you.
Well, you are welcome. And thank you to everyone for listening today, and stay tuned for more CHIO conversations coming your way. You can catch all of our past episodes on chiomega.com. Also, if you have any podcast ideas or podcast guests you'd like to hear from in our next broadcast, let us know. Just email us at chiomega@chiomega.com. And as always, keep an eye on our social media channels so you can be sure to join us next time. Thank you.